Hey guys, this is Mr. Luke, and today we're going to be talking about a story from the Bible where Jesus, after he's been crucified, after he's been dead, appears back to his friends, and some of those friends have trouble believing what they're seeing, and others don't have quite as much trouble believing what they're seeing. But the most important part of this story is that Jesus helps those friends who are struggling to believe. And so we'll dig into that for a little bit. But before we get to that, I want you to think about the front door in your house. I don't know if it's this way anymore, but when I was growing up, cell phones weren't quite as big of a thing. And so sometimes you'd just get a knock on the door, or your doorbell would ring, and you'd be sitting there, and you'd think, well, who's that? I've got absolutely no way of knowing who's trying to come to my house, because people just kind of showed up at each other's houses back then. And so the doorbell would ring, or a knock would happen on the door, and me and my brother and my sister would jump up, because we always assumed it was one of our friends, but they couldn't drive, so that probably wasn't the best thought of ours. And we'd run over to the door to go see who's there. And most of the time it was one of my dad's friends. They were just driving by the house, decided to see what we were up to. Because that's probably something that doesn't really happen anymore either. Just like stopping at someone's house like, hey, what are you doing? But we'd run to the door, and it would be my dad's friend, Dan, or something. We'd turn around, disappointed, and we'd yell, Dad! Dan's here! And then Dad would go to the door and visit his friend, Dan, or whoever it was. But so when I was growing up, there was a sense of mystery when there was a knock on the door. You never knew quite who it was going to be. And so I want you to think about that front door of your house, and you're not expecting anyone, and you hear a knock on the door. And it could be anyone, someone that you would never expect to show up at your door. So like, I was thinking about this earlier, and like, I don't know, nowadays, like, everyone texts me, says, hey, I'm coming over, or whatever. So I'm like, cool, I know what to expect. And now when I get a knock on the door and no one's texted me, I like freak out a little bit. And I'm like, is someone trying to, I don't know, like, is it maintenance? Do they need to replace the air filter? You know, what's going on? But like, if I got a knock on the door and I look through my little, hole in the door or whatever, and I saw like Elvis, I would lose my mind. Be like, Elvis, like, what? Elvis Presley? Aren't you dead? What do you, like, how would I know that that's Elvis, And so I'd freak out. I'd lose my mind. It's awesome to have unexpected visitors. And I suppose, like, if there was Elvis, I'd have a lot of questions for that guy. And I'd definitely be like, can you say thank you very much? Or like, I hope all of his sentences would end like, oh. But so in this story, the disciples are gathered together, and they have an unexpected visitor. And so I want us to kind of get in their minds, because, like me, if Elvis came to my door, the disciples lost their minds when this friend of theirs visited. So it says, on the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together, with doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. And again, Jesus said, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you. And with that, he breathed on them and said, receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven. So we got kind of the same thing going on. There's this locked room now, and they're afraid of the Jewish leaders because, like, These are the same guys. They've been hanging around with Jesus the whole time he was there on earth. When they're in the garden and people are coming out, swords, betrayal kisses, all that stuff, they were like right there with them. And so these guys had just sent Jesus to the cross. And so now they're worried, the disciples, are like, what if they're going to come for us next? So they're locked up behind these doors, they're scared, and all of a sudden, like, boom, out of thin air, Jesus. So Jesus says, peace be with you. He shows them the holes, all that stuff. But in John, there's one person who's not there during all of this. A guy named Thomas, one of the guys who was with Jesus. And so John goes on to say, now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my fingers where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. And you could kind of see where this might make sense. I know sometimes we look at Thomas and we go, Thomas, you're being ridiculous. Jesus just came back from the dead. He said he was going to come back from the dead. Like, he's doing the exact stuff he said he was going to do. So it makes sense to just kind of take these other disciples at his word. But Thomas, like, I don't know, man. Like, it sounds kind of crazy. And it does sound kind of crazy. You know, someone just came back from the dead. This only happened so many other times in biblical history, right? And so I like to imagine that they're like, no, man, it totally happened. Like, believe us, we were all there. The door was locked. He appeared. We did just what you want to do. Like, believe it, you know? But so Thomas has his doubts. And we all have our doubts sometimes. But Jesus does something cool coming up here. It says a week later his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them this time. And though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them, saying, peace be with you. So I love, like, exact scenario, like Jesus, like, round two, like, we're doing it again. The doors are locked, we're here. And then Jesus has, like, one of those moments where he's like, by the way, everybody, remember, I'm God. I wasn't there for that conversation. I know exactly what they talked about. So without Thomas saying anything, Jesus is like, bam, I'm here. Peace be with you. Thomas, you want to put your fingers in the hole in my hand? Come on. My side, where the spear went. Touch it. You know? And so he says, put your finger here, see my hands. Reach out your hand, put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. And Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. And then Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you have been blessed. Blessed are those who have not seen me and believed. And so I think about this all the time. Like, there are moments in life where we have doubts. Maybe something really difficult is going on, or you prayed really hard for something and you just didn't get what you prayed for, and you wonder, like, I don't know. I'm having a hard time believing that God is there pulling for me when I can't see it. And so, kind of like Thomas, sometimes we can't see God. You know, we talk about how we're the image of the invisible God. We can't see God. He's all around us doing things, but he's like in heaven. It's this complicated thing going on. But Thomas gets this rare opportunity where he's able to see Jesus after he's been risen. And Jesus says, hey, this is really great. I'm helping you believe, I'll give you whatever you need to do. I'll prove myself to you. And sometimes for us, we wish that we could see Jesus too. But, you know, like, there's something that I was told probably a few years ago where, like, even though we don't see God, like, that's not enough reason to not believe. You know? And the example they gave was, like, the air. You can't see the air. It's all around me. It's right in front of me. In my ears or whatever. And I can't see the air. And so for me to be like, I don't know if air exists, you know, like it's kind of a ridiculous thing. But like, I look outside, and when the wind starts blowing, like I can't see the air, but I can see how the air's moving. I can see the effect that it has on other things. And in the same way, we can't always see God, but we can see God move. Sometimes it's just an answered prayer. Sometimes it's something crazy that you never would have believed could happen, and it happens. And even though we can't see him, like, God does all these things to help reveal himself to us, even though it's not always in person. But so, like, God does what he needs to do to help us believe in different times. So God helps us believe is the lesson today. It's totally okay to have our doubts. I know sometimes people have a hard time with feeling like they're doubting. They feel like they're doing the wrong thing. But, like, I remember, I think all you guys know this already, but, like, I didn't grow up in the church at all. My mom didn't really like Christians all that much. My dad didn't really like Christians all that much. And so when I started going to church in high school, I would read the Bible and I'd be like, did he really come back from the dead? Like, I'm having a hard time believing this. And I would talk to my youth pastor, and he would talk to me, help me out with understanding these different things. And he'd try to help me understand, and it never really clicked until I'd been going to church for probably 8 months. It was July. We had this summer camp. I don't know if you guys all do church summer camp. It wasn't quite VBS. We went all the way to, like, Missouri to go do a summer camp. And I don't even know what the guy was talking about. The whole time I was like, this is kind of cool. I get to hang out with my friends and we all share a cabin. Then we go tubing in the afternoon. But I wasn't quite sure about all the God stuff, right? And so we had chapel twice every day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. And in the afternoon chapel, I was sitting there and I'm like, all right, we got to listen to this guy speak for like an hour. And then we get to go have fun again, right? And so he's talking about whatever. I have no idea what the sermon was about. But so it was the strangest thing where I'm sitting there, we're in this big room at summer camp, and again, like, I still have no idea what this guy's talking about, and all of a sudden, I was sitting there in that room, and it was like, I knew God was there. And I can't really describe it, it doesn't make sense, but when you talk to people who had a similar experience, they're like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I felt like God was in the room, right? And I felt like he was right there with me, and it was a big room full of people, but like, I was kind of in my own head, kind of not really paying attention to the people around you. And so I was like, this is crazy. It was like I understood all of a sudden, you know? And like, this is crazy. Like, I gotta do something. Like, I know now, like, God, he didn't just like, appear to me and go like, peace be with you or anything. But like, however he did in my mind, like, he proved to me that he was there, you know? It was the moment that I found God, you know? But I really love this story with Thomas and the disciples because, like, in my own life, I had this similar moment of, like, I doubted, I needed proof, and I didn't know anyone who could, like, give me proof. They could be like, yeah, man, like, this is the real deal. But I was still like, I don't know, like, I just gotta see it. And when I was there at that summer camp, like, in that room, like, God helped me the same way he helped the disciples, the same way he helped Thomas. He had to do whatever he had to do to prove himself and to help me believe. And I think God does that for everyone. You know, for me, that moment happened in camp. Like, for you, God might do crazy things that help you just have that certainty in totally different ways. And, like, he did it for me, he did it for the disciples, And I believe He'll do it for you too. And it'll come at the right time. So when you got those moments where you're struggling, you've got your doubts, you're a little bit worried about this or that or the faith or whatever, just know, like, our God is a God who reveals Himself. That's what Revelation says, you know? And so in that moment, at the right time, whatever that time is, like, God helps us with our unbelief.